Ready to start? Yes. Are we ready to start? Yes. Okay, let's do it and let's keep to time. Welcome, good morning, and happy to have you here in this, what I hope will be a productive panel discussion about a very interesting topic. In my view, probably a topic that's our biggest learning edge in our sector. How can we actually affect change at scale? We have wonderful individual solutions, we have wonderful small-scale solutions, even maybe some supply or value chain solutions, but the bigger patterns still need to change for us to be able to see, a return to maybe achieving some of those social, climatic, or other such targets that are vital for humanity to survive for the long term. So the panel aims to talk about those, about the systemic solutions. What are those where investors, entrepreneurs, governments can work together to not only change a few or small-scale issues, but affect large-scale value chain, supply chains, and hopefully also some underlying assumptions and dynamics of the systems. For those of you who were there at the dinner, I think Uli already spoke about the wall. Right, so we're talking about solutions that could also shift the wall, not just improve some speed of the positive changes, but also try to make a difference at the deeper root cause and design of our systems. And we have 4 great panelists with lots of experience in this matter, but I think also with a lot of questions and challenges themselves around the topic, right? And we were just exchanging with Andrea, and he has a good provocation around maybe what's holding us back from doing more of these macro level changes. We have Uli from the EIF. He's at the Impact Days forever, as we heard, and we're really happy to have you here. At the EIF, of course, you're supporting access to finance for SMEs and mid-cap organizations, working with fund managers and backing them up. But I think also as an individual, you are thinking a lot about this question. So I'm really looking forward to hear more from you. Then we have Andrea from CBIS Global, who is actually a responsible investment manager, managing over, I think, what did I have, 100 billion? Yeah. We have... Yeah, we wish, right? But 10 billion in assets, right? 11, here we go. Pretty big capital managed. And then we have Clemens, who is coming from the entrepreneurial side with everwave, looking at a very interesting and innovative plastic credit scheme, helping to get pollution out of rivers before it reaches the oceans, right? And Marcello, who's putting together a wide community of over 100,000 change leaders. That's the ambition, right? 90,000, okay, not 100,000, but okay, 90,000 change leaders for good leaders in a cooperative structure, and really looking at the regenerative economy and how we can more take at scale responsibility for this agenda, right? So the panel is entitled Rethinking Value. So let's start with that part of the sentence, rethinking. And the first question I would ask is, what is the rethinking that needs to be done around value to be able to think these systemic solutions, right? So the mindset change that needs to lie when we change the register from the one-to-one solutions to the many-to-many solutions. That's maybe the first provocation from my side, and I'd love to hear your perspectives. Maybe we can start from Uli this time, and then for the next of the questions, we'll mix up.
Sure. Yeah, here we go. Well, I think the debate on the kind of opposition between profit generation and value generation in economy is now in the market, in the public debate for quite some time. I think we've started in the early 2000s thinking about concepts to integrate externalities in economic cycles, and over time this has become also through consumer behavior and regulatory behavior that has become something that has been integrated by businesses more and more in the way how they perceive risks, in the way how they generate revenues, in the way how they interact with the stakeholders and the like and the like. But I think the one missing part that we have in in the concept of value creation in our economic system is that we go about these items of externalities, cost of externalities and the like, still from the perspective that we can pay these off somehow in the process. That it is something that we need to almost pay a penalty for in the economic system. But once this penalty is paid, either by consumer behavior that kind of diverts to other more responsible suppliers, or by taxes that you pay on carbon credit consumption or whatever have you, once we have paid this off, we go by the assumption that then we are out. And I think that is the big problem that we are facing in our interaction with the planetary system. We believe that we need to fix the planet, and if we fix the planet somehow, we are going to be fine to live on like we do today. And in doing so, we make the major mistake that we don't actually realize that we are part of the planetary system. It's not something that we are fixing and let generously survive next to us. We are an integral part of it, and actually we are possibly the most meaningless part in it, because let's face it, the planet is going to survive no matter how. The question is whether we are going to be part of that planet that is going to survive. Because nature is a kind of concept of circularity, which always actually strives back to equilibrium. And in doing these iterations, nature eliminates anything that disturbs the equilibrium and finds a new equilibrium after elimination of the disturbing factor, which may or may not include the disturbing factor going forward. But there will be an equilibrium after that. Now, I think we can be confident stating that as humankind, we are disturbing the equilibrium. And we need to ask ourselves the question of what is the nature going to do with us as being this disturbing factor. So I think when we bring that back to the discussion how we are dealing with value creation and the concept of value in the economic system, we are still in the process of paying off our duty and then live on as if nothing happened. And where we need to get to is that actually the money that we collect for paying off the damage that we are doing to the planet, we need to reinvest to repair the planet, to actually direct it to measures that undo the damage that we are creating. And that's the big mistake that we are doing with all these carbon credits and the stuff that is around, which is obviously a good thing to penalize people and companies and the like for doing damage because it costs money to them. But if we take that money and then put it into the state budgets and build highways and airports and create subsidies for fossil energy bills in the recession or something like that, that's not going to save us. And I think that's the big problem that I see with the trade-off between value and profit. But I stop there.
Thank you. I saw some head nodding and also some reflective looks. So invitation is to react to each other's opinions. I'd love to hear from Andrea maybe as next.
So Uli gave me a hard time. I was thinking I should approach this first part of the conversation because you introduced so many concepts. Let me clarify one thing, what I and who I represent here today. So our firm, regardless the amount of money that we manage, which could be relevant but not necessarily essential. I think it's more interesting to acknowledge who we do that for. So we are, it is in our name, CBIS stands for Christian Brothers Investment Services. So our owner, we belong to a Catholic congregation that founded this firm 45 years ago, initially to serve the financial needs of the congregation under Catholic social teachings. And I'm gradually introducing what value, consumers, economy, profit means for the audience I represent. And then over time, we became a manager of financial assets for a multitude of other Catholic investors around the world. So when I was invited to this panel today, I thought, what could be the value of that we bring to this conversation? And I kept thinking that essentially if you had any exposure to the audience of investors we take care of, you realize that they never made a separation between economic value, profits, economic systems, and impact, because it's embedded in their mission. So and I don't want to make any theological speech here today, but it's in the fact. So when we serve this Catholic institutions, we are never asked as a first request to maximize the financial profit, the return, the yield of a portfolio. Of course, they don't want to lose money. But the first request we are made is, how are we serving our mission through the work you're doing for us? And it with different terminology and in different journeys, but it goes straight to economic justice, part of the what the economic systems are, how the economic systems are serving people, human dignity, and you can imagine how for a Catholic institution this is important. And I'm connecting this directly with what Uli was mentioning about the supply chains, with a huge amount of work on direct engagement with firms which have overlooked for a long time all the supply chain processes, and this goes directly into human dignity, and not just that, but also economic justice. And there is one other element which was covered by a Pope letter a few years ago, Pope Francis, which is care for creation, so the environment, with Laudato Si letter, if any of you was interested to read that. So we feel a bit isolated in a way, because we belong to the financial services. So we are an asset manager. This is what we do as a job. But we do this for a group of investors which are, in a way, pioneers in thinking how to generate impact with their financial resources. And in the last 15, 20 years, this became sort of more mainstream. But we've been doing this, and our clients have been doing this for almost centuries. So when I was thinking, okay, how can I contribute to this conversation, I thought, okay, I can tell you what our investors do and how they do that and why they do it. And I think there are a lot of points of overlap, sometimes not total overlap, but sufficient overlap to justify our presence here today.
That's going to be the next question with a concrete example. So thank you for saying that. Clemens, from the entrepreneurial side, how do you see the rethinking value question?
That's a tough one for me, because obviously I have a personal opinion and an entrepreneur opinion on that. My personal opinion, and that's what I experienced yesterday as well, is we have to agree on values and we have to agree on impact and the definition of that. And I think here are 4 people in the panel, or 5 people in the panel, who would answer that differently. And we are at least in the same bubble, and that's a challenge, because legislation will follow values. And if we don't agree on values, we don't have the right legislation. On an entrepreneurial level, we as an organization, Everwave, we see a challenge, which is plastic in the environment. And we try to be as pragmatic as possible on that. And actually, it doesn't matter where finance or our finance come from. We just want to keep our projects rolling and growing. And therefore, of course, we kind of pay off what we mismanaged in the last couple of years, let's say 50 to 100 years. But that's our responsibility. And I think we should dig deeper there and use that money to develop something better. So I think we should try to see it from both perspectives, kind of repair what we've done before and move forward in a better way. So that's kind of the value we want to create as an organization.
Cool, and we look forward to hear how. And Marcello, on the same question, what's your perspective on rethinking value?
So, two things. I want to ask you a question, actually. But before that, I think that we're living in two different worlds. One world is our world, which, as Clemens says, with certain values. And then there is a mainstream world, which has different values and has those practice finance differently. So I'm actually, and I've been involved in this for many years. 30 years ago in the Netherlands, we started the first impact investment fund, which is very successful actually. And I'll tell you why later. And there's many, many of us, I also started a movement of B Corps in Europe. And I was for 5 years global ambassador. So I've been to many countries. There's so much going on that we would appreciate that would actually resonate with our own values. On the other hand, we are working in a stack system that is working against us. So my question is, I've just done it on ChatGPT this morning. 3 figures. One is percentage of global GDP in perverse subsidies. Second is percentage of global GDP in what is called dark money. There's criminal money, drugs, mafia, all this. And thirdly is percentage of GDP in offshore funds that are basically out of the legislation of our government. So could someone tell me that these 3 amounts of money together, what do they comprise in terms of global GDP? Any guess? Who would like to try? Johannes, can you give me a guess? Is it 10%, 5%, 20, 30, 40? What do you think? So actually it's 30%. So 30% of global GDP is in these 3 categories. Perverse subsidies, that's about 7 trillion. Then dark money is about 12 trillion, and offshore money is 7-something trillion. So we are working in a system where actually a lot of this money is actually operating against the sort of values that we have, and the idea that we are here with a planetary responsibility towards our planet. So I remain very excited, I would say, about the power of entrepreneurs like us to make a difference. And I have some specific examples. And maybe the best one, I give it very quickly, is because I live in the Netherlands. We have a bank in the Netherlands called Triodos Bank. It's been around for 45 years. It's not a big bank. It's about 25 billion in assets. But they've been doing this sort of impact investing since the beginning. And it works. And they've just launched a nature investment fund, 500 million euros, which I would advise all of you to look at that white paper on nature-based investment, because it's got a lot of the things that I think we need to discuss here. So there are examples like this. Ronald Cohen in the UK with social bonds and the global steering group for impact investing, fantastic stuff going on. But the system within which we work is basically stacked against us. So what do we do about changing that system? And then, maybe that's the next question, the next round. Thank you.
That's exactly the next question. We're going to do one more question with everybody, and then you're going to be invited to also ask questions and interact with the panel. And the next question is on the solution side. And I know there aren't easy solutions or already made solutions. They don't have to be perfect. But the question to you is, which are those solutions that you think hold potential for systemic change? Right? So, and what would they take to actually make the change, right? So carbon credits, you said earlier, interesting, it does certain things, but it doesn't do other things in terms of addressing the deeper rethinking that needs to be done. How could it change, right? So I'm curious, you are people who work with these large-scale financial instruments, some of you, others with other instruments that mix investment with regulation and entrepreneurial solutions. Which ones hold potential to actually make a macro level
Can I have a go?
change? Yes.
So I think that Uli was saying it's a systemic issue. So I found that you need to have an ecosystem approach where most of the time you have to have a public sector involvement, whether it's a city, a province, a government, that actually thinks a bit longer term and creates the incentives and the facilities for private investors to come in. So a private investor on his own or her own can do limited things within a system that doesn't support the same objectives. So, and there's many cities and provinces. I mean, there's the whole bioregional movement. There's bioregions around the world where actually governments create incentives or longer-term fiscal incentives, sometimes regulations, to facilitate the sort of investment. So, and then again, for many years, my colleagues and I have been working on public-private partnerships. So that kind of approach, which also includes philanthropy. So I would say public-private philanthropy, and then the other P is individual money. That kind, it's not easy, it's complex, but it creates the longer-term and systemic perspective. And there are attempts to do this also at the global level. I mean, the World Bank is doing some work around this way. The European Investment Bank is the largest bank in the world, by the way. And they are actually, so we should be proud as Europeans to have a bank that is really understand the systemic issues, and so on and so forth. Triodos and other, there's a lot happening, but it needs a systemic approach where different stakeholders work together to make a difference.
And could you give us one example of these private-public philanthropic partnerships that you've seen work in an effective way? Because yes, they require systemic mindset and way of working together, but as you said, that's very difficult to make happen. Have you seen successful ones that maybe can inspire others?
I was lucky, I worked a lot in Denmark and Sweden. Denmark started 40 years ago with the strategy that 30 years ago in Denmark, a tax on car was 100%, because they didn't want to develop a car industry in Denmark. So they created actually very active policies towards renewable energy, wind energy, and many other forms of sustainable business. So Denmark in itself is a small country, but it's one of the pioneers that has been doing this concertedly. Governments, the banking sector, private, private businesses working together, Sweden, quite similar to what Denmark has done. So it is possible. And at the same, and also I would like to say, the Scandinavian model is the model that has created pro-entrepreneurship, pro-social, pro-solidarity. So there is a really fantastic mix. Unfortunately, not many countries have learned from Scandinavia, but I think there is actually a model there that is very valuable, and I think it can be extended to other countries. So I remain optimistic in the sense that it is possible. It's increasingly challenging, but smaller countries, China is a whole different, issue, and some of us have worked in China. We work now in China in building a more ecological civilization. But 1.5 billion people, they need to eat, they need to grow, and so it's very different than Denmark or even Austria. So I think the challenge is the bigger countries, the bigger population, of course, developing country where people don't have what we have, and so anyway, I stop here. But it is possible to create the kind of virtuous ecosystem, because I've seen it happen. We've seen it happen, and I think in Europe, it should be proud of what we have achieved in parts of Europe.
Thank you. Maybe I will pass it on to Andrea next, because you were also starting to go into the solution level, right? And you said you're doing this for way longer than some of our sector is doing, this way of thinking and interacting. So maybe I go to you.
So I'm afraid I will not, I will disappoint the audience, because I don't have a solution. I don't think that, any of us will come up with a solution, but I will use the provocation way to stimulate and keep this conversation alive even after the session will be closed. So I'll start saying that although I personally don't disagree with what Marcello said, I have serious doubts that this is a viable solution alone. Okay? And I'm here thinking about, for a second, taking distance from the values. Okay? But more on the practicalities, and I noted down two very actual situations why I see this challenging. He brought the example of the Nordic economies in Europe, which don't have budget problems in their public finances, and they can afford the tax, influencing through the fiscal policies certain behaviors. Southern Europe, just to mention, one other area of Europe, will be in greater challenges to go through the same route. And the other thing, which is very, very actual, days, weeks, or hours ago, as we have certain public administrations which have been taking different directions from previously, without naming, anyone in particular, and this was already mentioned earlier this morning in introduction. Unfortunately, those tools are not impossible, but subject to changes. So those alone, I think we in the financial services have been thinking about, the public side of the world helping with these tools for too long, without relying enough on a bottom-up contribution to this. And bottom-up is, communities. What's happening here in Vienna? I was not aware about all this ecosystem in Vienna. To me, this is an incredible positive surprise. This is amazing. It's a drop in the ocean, of course, if you think about how big the world is and how diverse the world is, but this is a good example. So one thing I was sharing before we started this with Gabriela is the fact that, so I joined the firm I worked for 2 years ago, and I come from, financial services, global asset management, very boring stuff. Where we feed ourselves, and we fed ourselves for decades on terminologies which were totally autoreferential. To the point that if you talk to, for example, one of the investors we now take care of, and we talk about ESG or SRI, they look at you like you were coming from a different planet. What do you mean by ESG? This kind of a reaction made me think that there is a segregation on similar goals. So, of course, financial services establishing, thanks also to the support of the public, of the regulators, and ESG movement was totally in overlap with values that have a Catholic investor or any other faith-consistent investor, or even an agnostic investor. I mean, it's to do good. Okay, so but the fact that we all of us tend to segregate what we do in our bubble prevents this scalability you were mentioning before. So just to wrap this up, those ways, I would personally think are tools to sustain auto-sustainable ecosystems and not relying on the public authorities too much.
Thank you. That's a good provocation. We're part of that. That's something we can hopefully take on as a challenge as well. And Clemens, do you want to take us into your approach to the solutions and what you see as potential? You can talk about the ocean credits or beyond. Your choice. What you see has potential for macro impact.
Actually, there were a couple of things coming in my mind, because now you mentioned the drop in the ocean, and you mentioned the wall evening, which was kind of related to me, because I've obviously thought about that. Do we, or as an organization, move the wall? And I think it's really a matter of perspective. On a global scale, we collected 2 million kilograms of waste from waters worldwide. There are 4 million tons of plastic produced annually, and 9% are recycled. So it is a drop in the ocean. Do we make a difference and move the wall on a local and national level? 100%. And therefore, my question, or maybe also for the market in general, and we talk to a lot of investors, is manage your expectations, what you want from an investment or from a company you invest in terms of time and in terms of return on investment. And what I mean with time is, you have been mentioning the carbon market before, and the plastic credit market is kind of in the same stage. There are places, the Philippines, for example, they have it as a mandatory system already because they have huge waste management challenges. We gave so many markets 50 to 100 years to develop, and we gave them the opportunity to develop, obviously, in the wrong direction. And especially with the carbon market, but also with the plastic credit market, which is coming up, biodiversity and whatever, we have the expectation that it will run after 3 to 5 years perfectly fine. Everything is fixed, the certificates are in place, and that's, from my perspective, a wrong expectation, simply because we have to give entrepreneurs, but also markets, time to develop and then create as much impact as possible. So this is something I'm really missing in the discussion. I was missing yesterday and today. is the perspective on time, because I don't know how you think about investment, but there is people I talk to, they have a 3 to 5 year perspective on investments, and they are not part of my cap table. They will never be, because it's simply, you know, we go in a market like Cambodia, and we built the first ever sorting facility there. So it's not, the 3 to 5 year perspective is never something I think about. It's, we do a drop in the ocean, but the perspective is always 50 years plus. So create impact, real impact, measurable impact long term. And yeah, hopefully we agree on that.
Let's see. No, we don't seek agreement, though. We seek debate and learning about the topic. So thank you for the provocation. Uli, what's your perspective on what holds potential, even if it's maybe imperfect at this time?
Well, I've got a piece of good news and a piece of bad news. The piece of bad news that I have is that we don't have 50 years, full stop. The piece of good news is that I might have a solution. The solution that I envisage is actually starting off with a quantum leap in our thoughts that we need to do, which is the debate on trade-off between financial value and impact, which is dominating the impact investment scene since ever it has been created in 2007 or so. And we are kind of spinning in this question ever since, trying to persuade mainstream market that there isn't any trade-off, and then trying to cheat somewhere that there may be one, but we might have some philanthropist who is going to take it up and things like that. The reality is that as a society, we are facing a gigantic trade-off, and the trade-off is binary. The question is, who is going to pay for this trade-off? And in our current debate, we always have the impression that it is something that needs to be sorted out between businesses and investors. But the reality is that this is a trade-off that we face as society, and we need to find different ways of having this trade-off be paid for. And it can be paid for by taxpayers, it can be paid by consumers, it can be paid by philanthropists if we want to have it. There are many stakeholders that actually can pay for the trade-off. But if we go for this concept that whoever pays for the trade-off, the money that we collect from that payment stream, we need to use it differently than we do it today. We need to use it to repair the damage that we've done and to create business models that work better in the future, as Clemens has said properly just before. And let me bring that back to the carbon taxes or plastic taxes or whatever. Do you remember what we have been debating the longest in the context of COP29 last year? The one debate that actually almost snookered the outcome of that conference. It was the question of how big are going to be the transfer payments between the industrial world and the developing countries, and who is going to pay for it. Now, if we went into a concept where everything that we levy in terms of carbon taxes, plastic taxes, or whatever we have in payoffs for externalities, rather than putting that in the general state budgets, we actually put that into funds that fund specifically and in a dedicated way action that undoes damage from the past and prevents damage from the future. On a very macro level, we suddenly would be in a position to pay entrepreneurs and landowners in Brazil for preserving the Amazon. Or we would be in a position to monetize the value that a company like Clemens is creating by extracting plastic from the ocean and preventing us that whenever we eat fish, we've got a bigger likelihood of eating nanoparticles of plastic rather than omega-3. And if we break that down to every layer of our economy, we come to a totally different system of trading societal value that is created by companies, and are in a position to fund the initiatives like the one Clemens is working on, or hundreds others that can even go into the research of trying to capture new technologies that prevent us from having pesticides in our food chain or in our drinking water and what have you. But since we don't have this, and actually, as we speak here, 2 houses down the streets, there's the budget of the Austrian government debated. And they have a requirement of having to save something like 6.4 billion of state expenditure within basically this year, which is a big amount for a country like Austria. And they actually are grabbing whatever they can get, and some of the measures is to tax stuff that is not working in our economic system, and they're going to take this and fill some holes that they have in the pension system and in the healthcare system and things like that. But this is just kicking the can down the road. And that is the problem that I see with the use of our public resources. We are not seeing this as an investment in our own sustainability, in our future. We're seeing this as paying off for an expense.
Thank you. Sobering, but also a solution. I think that's a nice mix. So you've heard a number of perspectives, a number of potential solutions. My question back to you is, what questions do you have? So I see a first question here. Do we have a microphone from the room? Just so that at the back you can also hear.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let me challenge the panel quickly. What we're really discussing here is, can we use the markets to fix our problems? My contention is no, it doesn't work. It's like Uli's speech yesterday night, we can slow down from 410 kilometers to 320 kilometers, but we're going to wall. Now don't get me wrong, our owners, the princely family of Liechtenstein, is deeply committed to sustainability. We run a 6 billion impact fund. We run a 3 billion of their money in net zero. We have a philanthropy venture. All this is peanuts compared to the money we need. And my contention is, all we're discussing here is using a market system which does not finance externalities and therefore will not work. So ultimately we need government intervention. We need regulatory intervention to force the investments which you suggest. Wouldn't that be ultimately a solution we need to look for?
Let's hear some perspective.
So what I say is that the example I quoted of Denmark and Sweden is obviously that Denmark was very active. The government of Denmark was very active, has always been very active in governing the economy. I think regulation is only part of what governments can do. They can do many more things than regulation. I mean, like they could, for example, promoting certain industries, certain sectors, and going away from certain sectors. So my numbers about perverse subsidies, I think Denmark has lower perverse subsidies in comparison to other countries. So absolutely agree with you. I mean, the market, of course, you can think about what China doing. China is a very controlled economy, or even Singapore is quite a controlled economy. Now, I don't think we would like to be authoritarian in Europe, but we would like to have more governance of the economy. So there I agree with you. But then there is another question about the long-term horizon, that most of the politicians and our system is 4 years, 2 years. And so we don't have the kind of longer-term wisdom that is needed. So what do we do?
I'm thinking you exactly, because you just mentioned the government and their choice of where to put the money.
I would say it's a little bit of a play of words that we're doing, because ultimately if we truly price externalities, it is a concept of market. It's basically making the planet a stakeholder in the market. And I think that's what we are missing. And if we are doing that, and if we are pricing that fairly and use that money that we collect from that to genuinely undo the damage that is done, we are ending up in a market system, because then society, companies and enterprises and businesses are going to find out that there is a cheaper way of using the raw material planet by having more responsible business conduct, rather than paying off the damage that they're doing. It's basically a raw material question for a company. It's as cruel as this may sound. I mean, this is I feel personally hurt using those terms. But if we reason in market terms, that's what's happening in profit maximizing enterprises. So I would say that if we go down that route, and if we genuinely come to the pricing and of resources that are used, and we end up in a kind of circularity system with that, That doesn't mean that every single action that we are doing in a circularity system is going to be neutral. But the entire system, between subsystems that are deficit making in terms of carbon credits and things like that, and others that are kind of giving credits that are beneficial to the ecosystem. If this overall system is neutral, we have a chance to survive. But this is nothing else but an orchestrated market system. What is missing today is the orchestrator.
I'd invite another question, just so that we hear a few more, and then invite the two of you to react to that one. I see you're stirring. Of course, you all have opinions, but let's hear one more.
So this is getting fun, thank you.
Yes.
We're heading at the wall. It's very hard to get out of the car while you're driving at the wall and move the wall. Can we shift the angle and avoid the wall? Is my question, and getting very concrete. I like this idea, Uli, of creating a way to put the money into restoration and resilience systems. What are the most efficient ways we have to do that at the moment is my question. If you look at the Montreal Protocol, for instance, that was massively efficient. It worked really well, and the world came together, governments and companies came together and did that quite rapidly. Carbon was very inefficient, but we've got there. Where do you see the next efficient solutions in this?
Do you want to go ahead?
I'm a bit confused because I think the systems are already there. It's called EPR,
Okay.
which is Extended Producer Responsibility. And in the European Union, every country has to implement EPR systems this year, I guess. So getting enterprises into paying for what they pollute is there's a system for that. So or a framework at least. And I think there are a lot of opportunities to do. I agree on the carbon market. I think it was the first market working in that direction, and that's the reason why they did a lot of mistakes in terms of transparency and everything we see with the Vera standard and whatsoever. But there are a lot of good things, and I think we could copy-paste these good things to other markets like the plastic credit market, like the biodiversity credit or whatsoever, and implement that into the EPR systems is not, I don't know, rocket science. It's possible, and we see it, as I mentioned, the Philippines. They force the biggest polluters in the country to offset last year 20% of their plastic footprint. Till 2028, it's 80%. And that's as I mentioned, it's not rocket science. It's happening in the Philippines because, and that's the main driver for them, they are the biggest polluter of ocean plastic, and B, they suffer a lot due to lack of tourism, polluted beaches and whatsoever. So they understood the driver, and that's something which is missing obviously in Europe. We don't have the challenge. We don't see the challenges in the markets. There's no really polluted river. There's no. I mean, we have heating and less rain, but let's be honest, we like sun, so still manageable. And yeah, that's a challenge.
Thank you. Andrea, do you want to comment as well on that?
So I also had a comment on the previous question, so I'll try to kind of merge the two, connect the two. So I see the definition of systems a little bit differently. With systems, I'm thinking about the markets. So I will have two comments. One is about the previous question, and one is about your question. So about this could be, exchangeable. So about the markets, I think that the public should help the private to make better, so not interfere with the private. So the public cannot replace the private. That's a notion I think we should acknowledge. Otherwise, yes, we will keep kicking the can down the road. And this is the experience we had, I think, for the past 25, 30 years, with the exception of very virtuous small countries. So the public should put themselves in a position to help the private. And financial markets could play a positive role. And I'm thinking about two ways to achieve that. First of all, are you a listed company, or you get okay? So if this kind of companies don't have access to the capital markets, they will remain small forever. They will have to rely on generosity of private philanthropy. So the systems are not Austrian state, Italian state, Danish state will be generous and give you money. The system has to be, I will allow you to have access to capital markets at decent conditions. Help you growing, not subsidize you to grow. It's a fundamental paradigm shift. The other, I think, and this is where I see the public could help. The other comment I wanted to share has nothing to do with the public. We, part of the ecosystem, we asset managers, consumers, other stakeholders should stop complaining and start acting. What we do when we are a small firm, $11 billion is nothing when you compare it with the trillions of assets under management in savings globally. We have, as we speak, 100, exactly I think 98, 100 active ownership engagements with listed firms, going from Exxon, Apple, Hermes, Total, and you name it. And this is not proxy voting. This is not exclusion. And we have to pay attention because a lot of the active ownership has been confused with I give my proxy to this firm and I will vote in the general meeting, or I will exclude the stock because I don't think that they're doing the right thing. This is a totally different game to play. This is about going there and pushing them and influencing these firms to do the right thing. And I promise you it works because we have measurable evidence of changed behaviors from big firms that can make a difference that were far to be where they are today just 5 years ago. That
makes a difference. Perfect. I see, Uli, you really want to add one final point. We're almost at time, but I will invite one final comment from there, and I
I agree with plenty of the elements that Andrea has put forward, but I have to air my disagreement with one, which is that whenever we talk about paying for public good, we fall into the trap of talking about subsidies. This is genuinely wrong. We have got a price that we have set for 1 ton of plastic going into the ocean, right? This is the principle of plastic credits or carbon credits on the other side. Why can we not set a price for 1 ton being removed from the ocean? And then precisely being remunerated by something that is fueled exactly by the tax that is collected in the first place by the people that are putting the plastic in the ocean in the first place. This is the concept of circularity, and that comes back to the point that you were mentioning. How do you integrate this in the market concept? We are applying it on the one side, and whenever we deal with the other side, we say, okay, this is subsidizing businesses that are doing stuff that cannot be sold in the market. I think that is the problem that we have in our mind.
Can I just yes, of course you have. This is when it's good.
The point I was trying to make is whichever form you find to compensate bad behavior is wrong. You have to act on the behavior itself. Instead of paying somebody to compensate the plastic or the carbon emissions, or instead of paying somebody from collecting the plastic, which is something which is needed, you should also think of ways to prevent somebody else putting the plastic in the ocean or generating more emissions.
But that's a pricing topic, right? The more expensive the plastic credit gets, the more people will think about reducing their footprint.
No, because they will transfer that price to the consumer. they will transfer the price to the consumer.
That's the risk.
Goods will cost more to the end consumer, and this is at the cost of the growing economies, which will suffer in incredible levels of inflation rates going forward.
But there, with the gentleman in the first row, as long as it pays off to pollute, the market will not change. So we need to intervene.
Exactly.
No, I mean, I'm reflecting on the fact that, of course, finance and money, we know they drive the economy, but there's also something beyond finance and money, which is the consciousness of entrepreneurs and leaders. And my experience in the last 20, 30 years is that actually there has been an evolution. A lot of the younger entrepreneurs, younger leaders, they understand immediately what the issues are and they're doing something. So that gives me a lot of encouragement. I mean, this movement of B Corps, it's 10,000 companies, we have legislation in many countries and beyond. So I think that also Ronald Cohen with the Impact Investing Initiative around the world. So it's actually how do we shift the consciousness and consciousness leading to different way of governing our companies and our economies. So money is essential, but money is not the only thing that actually going to make a difference.
And that brings us back to the topic of the panel, which is rethinking value, not just moving money in the same different systems, right? So I thank you for being open to the learning and the debate. This, in my view, is the learning edge for our sector. I hope we continue the debate, because we need to also change our consciousness and our own beliefs around which mechanisms work and how and why. Even if we're maybe in the bubble of the impact-driven community, that doesn't mean we've learned that edge. So I appreciate you being open to that. Let's give the panel a big round of applause. Thank you. Well done. And I think you are invited in a small break now, and then you'll have in your apps the next sessions in the other rooms.